Hi, I'm Melody.
I'm Candi.
And I'm Gabe.
And you're listening to
Quirks,
Bumps,
and Bruises. So have you ever heard from God in a very unusual way? A lot of people call those Godwinks. And I saw a quote that says this: Godwinks are tangible reminders of God's presence, offering hope and replacing apprehension with a genuine feeling of confidence that we can trust Him to take care of us. And so Godwinks can come in very unusual ways at times, don't you think?
I do. You know, you and I have some different takes on some of those, just this subject in general. Melody and I are friends, and we've had conversations about this multiple different times. So, yeah, very different.
You know, we have talked about that particular thing on the air before, and we've gotten some very great phone calls from some of the listeners who actually had that particular thing happen to them. Godwinks.
Yes, I had an encounter with God about 10 years ago. I was going through cancer, and I was just worried about the financial end of it. It was just overwhelming, and I just prayed and seeked God and just kept praying and wallowing self-pity. And in the middle of the night, I hear this loud calamity in my hallway. I get up, and there lays a framed picture that was hanging on the wall. And face up, unbroken, was the words, "I shall supply all your needs according to His riches and glory." I went right back to sleep and never worried about it again.
And you know, that right there, a lot of people would have just dismissed that as just something that happened.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times we miss the signs from God that He gives to us when we're going through something. And I think sometimes we're so burdened and so weighed down, and the anxiety level is so high that it's hard to even see it. But there are so many times when it's there. And I know, Candi, you've talked about that, having that very thing happen with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a person that I believe in God, and I know He does those things for people, and that He reminds us. And regardless of whether or not He reminds us that He is there, His words, He is there. It doesn't matter how you feel. However, I'm one of those, when I'm in a difficult situation, I need to hear from God. I need to hear Him say, "It's okay, I've got you. Here's a reminder." And a lot of those times, I have almost tried to force those things to happen, or I'll say, hey, I'm driving down the road. God, if you're going to speak to me, then I need to have this church sign that I'm about to pass speak to me. I need you to tell me, "Hey, I'm here, I'm listening." Or, I need to turn on the radio station and hear a song at just the right time for me. And if I hear this song, then that means you've got this under control. And so I almost kind of manipulate God, and that's not how it works. But I hear so many people, friends, Melody, you've done it too, who have said, God used a specific thing, and I was going through a difficult time. God did this for me, and I knew that was God. I knew He was speaking to me. And I've had to look and listen with, well, I'm glad God did that for you, but I don't get that. I mean, I'm looking for God on every cloud in the sky. Right. I'm looking at all these different things where He should be speaking to me. I pull my Bible out and I'm like, "Okay, God, I'm going to open this Bible and I'm just going to put my finger down, and on this verse, this is what you're going to use to speak to me." And it's like... And
it lands on Jesus wept.
Yes. Yes. And I'm like, "Okay, God, well, fine. Then you must just not be trying to talk to me." I currently going through some things, and I was in a staff meeting here at work, and heard someone give a devotion, as I'm trying to seek God, "What do you have to say to me, God? Why aren't you showing me things? Why aren't you showing me the path? Why aren't you doing this?" And during the devotion that this man is sharing on the call, not even paying attention. And it hit me. Whoa. He started saying some things, and I started to listen. And I thought, "Okay, God." am I missing all these things that you're trying to show me because I'm looking for it in other places?
Yeah.
Like right now, you are speaking to me through this person, but I'm not even paying attention because I'm so worried about my situation or so worried how God's going to show me how to get out of it. And
I think I said to you, because you and I had talked earlier that morning, I said, when you try to force the sign, you miss the sign.
Yeah.
When you're so busy trying to force it to happen, it could be actually happening somewhere over here, but you're so focused right here that you don't see that.
Yeah.
And I remember I was on that meeting too. I was on that call, and I had already talked to you that morning over some coffee, and we had talked about this very thing, about missing the signs that God gives us to help us through situations, or just to know that He's saying to you, I'm here.
Yeah.
I haven't gone anywhere. You may have moved a little bit down the road, but I am right here with you. And I had said that very thing to you, that sometimes you need to look for those signs in maybe the most unusual of places. So from there, we went into that meeting, and I was, you do have a million things on your mind. We were in the meeting, we were listening, and it was actually our executive vice president, Brian Sanders, was doing a devotion for us that day. First of all, he doesn't usually do the devotions.
Right.
Adam usually does our devotions. So it was unusual that he did the devotion that day. And then
Still didn't think of that.
Nope. And then as he began to talk, I sent you a text that said,
This is for you.
This is for you. And it gives me cold chills to even talk about that. And so there were a couple of things that happened that very day.
Yeah.
That I think because you began to look in places that you, instead of forcing it, God show me a verse, God show me a cloud, God show me this, it was beginning to happen where you could see it.
Right.
And you could understand
and
it.
trust Him.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree 100%. And I think that's, it's one of those things where God's like, look, I'm here. I've been here. I was the same God before this, and I'll be the same God after it. And I don't have to put fire down from heaven to show you that I'm here. Just trust me, believe me. And I think once you start doing that, and like you said, you stop looking for those magnificent, signs that come from God that you can tell somebody one day, that's when you really begin to see, okay, just stop looking and just open your eyes. Stop looking and open your eyes.
I think that verse in His Word that just simply says, be still and know that I am God, is probably one of the hardest things for us to do as human beings, because we're just not still very often. We have so many distractions, everything around us all the time, going 100 miles an hour, and it's so hard to just be still and know that He is there. And sometimes that's when you feel the most of His presence, is when we can get to that place.
Yeah.
I was thinking about some ways to recognize Godwinks. One of them, I think, is to listen to messengers. In other words, listen. God will use other people in your life, just like He did for you that day with the devotion. He will, use that. He will use, I think if we look for the extraordinary in the ordinary, sometimes it's just an ordinary thing, but it has an extraordinary result of a Godwink. And you can talk about that yesterday with a piece that we did about Joni Eareckson Tada.
Yeah, something we were going to put on the radio last week, actually, and something happened.
I forgot to edit it.
Yeah, it was. I didn't want to say it was your fault, but it was. Your fault.
It was a long piece, and we needed to get that narrowed down to a couple of breaks.
Oh yeah.
And it was my job to go in and edit that piece, and it just totally slipped my mind. So I didn't do it that particular day.
And you sent that reminder. You said, "Hey, y'all, I forgot to do this. I apologize. We'll do it next week. No worries. No big deal at all." And then, because of some different situations, I was the one who actually had to load that into our system, which meant I had to listen to it, make sure it sounded good. And that audio dealt with situations that I am facing. And had I listened to it last week, I didn't even think about that at the time. But in that mind frame that I was at last week, if I would have listened to that when it was originally supposed to be on the air, it wouldn't have been me sitting in the seat listening, or I probably wouldn't have even paid attention to it.
Somebody else could have been editing and putting it in. Yeah.
So for it to happen that way, that wasn't a coincidence that I was sitting here, and even as I was editing, and I thought, wow, this is speaking to me. And I thought,
the very first thing you hear is, "I will cast all my cares upon you," and and then it goes on. I mean, it was just absolutely for you.
It was, and even in that, I'm like, well, God, was that meant for me? Like, did you mean for that to be for me? Like, I still can't even sometimes accept that He is speaking to me.
Yeah.
Just be still and be just quiet and listen. And so, yeah, it is those gentle reminders that if you just open your eyes and not be, I don't want to say I'm cynical, but just that whole, well, God just doesn't love me like He loves other people, because we pick on Gabe a lot, God used a snake. Mm-hmm. He cannot stand snakes, and He actually used
now,
a
I would be
snake
glad for that one not to be my Godwink.
I know. But it was just a certain time when it was so
visual.
Yes, that there was no other way that it could have come from God.
Exactly.
You could not explain it any other way. And so I look for all those things, and I was like, man, Gabe, I'm thankful for you. I'm glad God did that for you, but man, I wish He'd do that for me. Mm-hmm. Maybe not use the snakes, but I wish He would do something so bold that I would know He's got me. Mm-hmm. Like He's not ignoring me. Mm-hmm. He's got me, and I just don't feel that. And then all these things happen, and I'm like, oh, well, God, maybe You are. I'm just not watching for
And
Him.
you had Godwink because I had got a request last week to send a lot of times I do devotions for our morning show. And people text me, call me, and ask me to send them those devotions.
Yep.
Well, because of just so much going on, I didn't get to that until the very day that you were just kind of struggling. Mm-hmm. And I went in there and I said, I got to send that devotion. And I pulled it up. I wanted to be sure it was the right one. And I was like, oh. And what did I do?
This is for Candi, and you sent it to me.
I sent it to that person, but I sent it to you as well. And so in one day, you had 3. But you could have missed that if we had not had that talk earlier, where you were already beginning to maybe begin to look for some of those things. And another way, I think, to recognize a Godwink is just to consider the big picture. Because God's perspective is always bigger. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And so knowing that in the big picture, everything does make sense.
Yeah.
But to see the big picture sometimes is difficult to do. And then just to consider timing, like we've just talked about, the timing of that happening that particular day at that particular time, I don't think could be anything but God.
Right.
That
not
all of those 3 things, 1, 2, 3, happened for you in just the nick of time, too. Almost just in the nick of time. And so God just has wonderful ways of showing us how much He loves us. Again, I think many times we miss those ways because we're just so bogged down in our stuff.
Yeah.
So if nothing else today, you may be in that very place in your life where you're feeling in despair and feeling weary and feeling hopeless and just wanting what Candi so desperately wanted, which was just a nod from God saying, I'm here for you. I love you. I've got your back. Mm-hmm. I'm here whether you think I am or not. I'm here. But I heard someone once say, it was a pastor that said, anything that happens in our lives, God is behind the scenes working a million details out at one time to make it come together. Mm-hmm. And the waiting process is always the hardest, don't you think?
Oh, it is. And I think, everything has to be approved by Him before it can happen. And so it's not like, I feel this way a lot, like, God, okay, are you aware that this is going on? Like, did you know this was going to happen? And of course He did. So He's not surprised. He's not shocked by anything. And, His word is true. He is there. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you feel it.
Yes.
He's there.
Yes. And He promises us in His word that he will never leave us and he will never forsake us. He didn't say, maybe once in a while I will.
Yeah.
He said, I will never,
Amen.
never leave you nor forsake you. And so today, take that promise with you as you go through this journey we call life that's so like a roller coaster, ups and downs, twists and turns, drops, falls, and sometimes you get a little nauseous.
Yeah.
So just take that with you today, that God is there. There are signs everywhere from him. We just have to take extra special precaution to look.
Thanks for listening to the Quirks, Bumps, and Bruises podcast with Melody, Candi, and Gabe. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and share the podcast. You can learn more at joyfm.org.